when you're moving really fast, trying to get a lot of stuff done, things that are kind of challenging get set aside. We'll get to that. It's important. We'll get to that. And trust can be challenging in part because for a lot of people, it's just this one big kind of ambiguous concept. It's not necessarily that they don't carry around in their head what the behaviors are that actually build trust and the behaviors that damage it. So it's hard to talk about, and it's hard to kind of, it's kind of like I know it when I see it, but actually that doesn't turn out to be true in many cases. But I find that people who are moving fast tend to set challenging conversations, like conversations around trust and what does that look like and sound like here, kind of to the side.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today we talk about trust, specifically with an author and coach that I admire deeply, Charles Feltman. He wrote the book on The Thin Book of Trust. This is his third edition of The Thin Book of Trust. Today we unpack it again. This is his second appearance on the podcast, so happy to share with you a little bit more with my dear friend, dear coach, if you will, Charles Feltman. Now, when I go through this with you, hopefully you will lean into the fact that trust is something that's important. It often comes with, thin level of awareness. I say thin level of awareness because I think a lot of people just assume they have trust. Well, what Charles has done, any good author, takes something that is, a broad word that everyone thinks they understand the definition to. Maybe they can try to put words to it. It's hard for some, but you put structure to it. And so he talks about the 4 domains of trust. We talk about them today, but we go deeper into one of them, specifically care. How do you make sure that people know that you care about them, that you have their best interest in mind, and that they can care for you back, because it's a two-way street. Now, we go into other elements of this, but we talk about trust today with the author of the third edition of The Thin Book of Trust, Charles Feltman. My name is Gene Hammett. I'm an executive coach. We do leadership development, helping companies that are in the midst of a big opportunity in front of them. We want to help them really optimize their team, get the alignment they need, get the leadership they need at all levels of the company. So the CEO, the C-suite, and even the managers and directors that are driving the business forward and developing the people around them, all these things have to work together to capture that opportunity. So if that's you, then I'd love for you to reach out to me, gene@genehammett.com. Let's get to know each other. I'd love to help you figure out what's standing in the way of your growth, what's standing in the way of your leadership as an organization. Maybe it's not individually, but it's across your team, and happy to help you identify what those issues are and develop a plan to help you move forward. Now, sometimes that plan involves you and my team working together, or sometimes it's you just executing on it because you're so clear about that. Either way, I'm happy to connect with you. Just send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. When you think about leadership and you think about growth, make sure you think about Growth Think Tank. Here's our guest today, Charles Feltman. Charles, how are you?
I am great. How are you, Gene?
Absolutely fantastic. Glad to have you on the podcast again. You're near and dear to my heart. I know that you made a difference in a lot of lives, but I can think 11 years ago when I was going through coach training, what an impact you made on my life as my mentor coach. I'm not sure if that's the right words, but
it was then, yes.
You changed my life, and I'm happy to have you back on the show. It was 2 years ago when we talked about your book the first time, which is probably the second edition. And now we have the third edition of The Thin Book of Trust by Charles Feltman. So thanks for being here.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. I remember the last conversation we had I really enjoyed, and I thought we got into some good stuff. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Well, I know my work is with mostly fast growth companies. And when you have fast growth companies, there's a certain amount of chaos that's acceptable. It's not all peace when you're driving hard, trying to innovate, trying to scale up teams, scale up revenues, scale up whatever it is you're looking at. But sometimes trust gets put into the back seat. Why do you think people don't focus on trust the way they could inside of our organizations?
I think there are a couple of reasons. One is that, like you said, when you're moving really fast, trying to get a lot of stuff done, things that are kind of challenging get set aside. We'll get to that. It's important. We'll get to that. And trust can be challenging in part because for a lot of people, it's just this one big kind of ambiguous concept. It's not necessarily that they don't carry around in their head what the behaviors are that actually build trust and the behaviors that damage it. So it's hard to talk about, and it's hard to kind of, it's kind of like I know it when I see it, um, but actually that doesn't turn out to be true in many cases. But I find that people who are moving fast tend to set challenging conversations, like conversations around trust and what does that look like and sound like here, kind of to the side, and don't have them.
One of the you use distinctions in your work. I know it's throughout the book on the distinctions of trust. And one of the distinctions I've seen people struggle with is managing work and leading people. Managing work is something we have to do inside of all of our organizations. And it's the KPIs, it's the challenges, it's the work, it's maybe what's next. But leading the person is the things like, hey, what's getting between our trust? And we confuse the two. I've noticed my clients, they focus very highly on managing work, and they don't really even know what leading the person means. They think they do, but they don't. So one of the tools I actually suggest them to do is to take moments where we talk about things that are not necessarily work related, as in the KPIs or the actual work, but talk about something like trust. If you're sitting in, running a workshop or talking with different individuals about trust, what would be one of the 2 or 3 things you would bring up in a conversation with a team to improve trust?
Well, I want to just wind back a little bit and talk about KPI and
Yeah.
trust. What if trust were a KPI?
Yeah.
That could change the conversation rather significantly. If you can identify what that KPI looks like so that you can actually evaluate somebody on how well they're doing building trust, that would be pretty significant. But going back to your question about what would I talk to a team about, what are the things that I think the first thing, and I do this a lot actually, is to help them understand that trust it isn't binary. It isn't just, either I trust you completely or I don't trust you at all. That we can trust people in some different ways. And the 4 assessment domains that you mentioned that I work with allow people to begin to do that more easily and effectively. Rather than trust being this one big thing, there are 4 somewhat distinct areas in which I can trust someone. And within each of those areas, we can really bring it down to what are the behaviors that build trust in this area, this domain, and what are the behaviors that can damage it. And so getting that across to the team so that they can begin taking a look for themselves at what they're doing that's building trust and what they're doing that could be damaging trust with each other and outside of the team with their the other teams or other groups or other stakeholders, if you will.
Going back to the trust thing, when I was looking through your 3rd edition of the Thin Book of Trust, you had asked people about their assessment 1 to 10. And the numbers were somewhere between 8 and 9 for the most part. But what stood out to me was trust in executive leaders. You may not remember the numbers. I think I highlighted it here, but it was below 7. It was in the 6s. Do you remember that study?
Oh yeah. Yes, I did. It was not a something that would go into a
6.43 was,
yes.
And you framed it as top management.
Yeah.
Are we still in a place, and I think we are, but I would love for you to just kind of explain to us a little bit about why employees are distrusting of top management today?
I think the biggest piece of that comes from the domain of, so we talked about those 4 trust domains. One of them is care, that you have my interests in mind as well as your own. When you make decisions and take action, you intend good for me. And I think there's a disconnect in that domain A lot of people look at the management, top leadership of their company, the executive leadership of their company, and see people who don't know them and don't really care that much about their interests. They just, want them to do their work, which is fine. But more and more, I think we're getting people in the workforce, the younger people in the workforce, who want to feel valued, who want to feel like, they're recognized not just by their own manager or their own leader, but higher up in the company. And then you also have people in the top executive leadership who are issuing RTO, return to office orders. Like, here you got 5 days to figure out. You've been living in this this hybrid world where you've got time at home and you can manage your life in a different way and still get your work done. But we don't trust that you're actually doing that. And so we're now giving you 5 days to figure it all out and come back to work full time. That, just that alone is a real trust breaker, I think. So, we'll see how that all plays out in these companies where people are doing that. But I'm going to guess that they're going to lose a lot of good employees over time as a result of that kind of thing. Because the trust, what that says to people is that top management doesn't trust them. And it also shows trust that top management doesn't care about them, doesn't have that sense of, having their employees' backs.
Now, let me jump in here because Charles had said something about care where employees feel like their managers don't know them. Now, why is this important? You may come from a place of work is just about work, and we're just here to get the job done, hit the KPIs, hit the goals, and then we go home and be with our families. I see it a little bit differently. I see work as one of the places we spend most of our time. And we want to be connected to the people that are there. We want to trust them. We want to care for them. And we'd like for them to care back from us. And so if you look at this, caring for others isn't just about the work. It's about the person. So it's important because it hits the bottom line. If you have a distrusting organization and people don't feel like you care about them, they're never going to be as loyal as you want them to be. They're never going to overcome the challenges and really innovate. They may not even have the psychological safety to say what needs to be said about what's next and new ideas or the gotchas that are around the corner that they see. I say this to you because I wanted to lay a foundation. A little bit later into this podcast, we talk about the behaviors. So I'll unpack that a little bit later. So just tune in for that. Back to Charles. Since we brought up the 4 domains of trust or the trust domains, I'd love for you to highlight them again. I don't want to go spend most of our in time on this because I have a sign in front of me, go deeper. So give us a quick, 1-sentence summary or 2-sentence summary of each of those 4 domains.
Care is one I've already mentioned. And that one is essentially, I trust that you have my interests in mind, as well as your own, when you make decisions and take action. You have my back, you care, you intend good for me. So that's the domain of care. I can trust people in that domain. I can distrust people in that domain. Another one is sincerity, which is really a sort of a combination of honesty. In other words, I can believe what you tell me, that you've kind of done due diligence and you're not just talking off the top of your head, and certainly not lying to me. So I can believe you. And also integrity, that is, you walk your talk. If you tell me something, you're going to follow it up with behavior that supports what you tell me. If you tell me something today, I'm not going to hear from somebody else in the organization next week that they told you something, you told them something completely different. So that's kind of the sincerity. It's honesty and integrity combined. Reliability is the domain in which relates to keeping specific commitments. So, an example would be, that I'm going to give you a report on something, and it's going to look a certain way and have certain information in it and so on. And I'm going to have it to you by Thursday afternoon. And I do it. And you can then, there's another notch on reliability. You can count on me to deliver on the specific commitments that I make. Or if for some reason I can't make that commitment, if something beyond my control has gotten in the way, I get back to you and I tell you as soon as I possibly can so that we can kind of figure out where to go next. And then the last one is competence, which is essentially, I trust that you have the experience, the expertise, the tools, if you will, the ability to do what you are proposing to do or what I'm asking you to do. Or if for some reason there's something that you don't have the competence in, that you'll tell me, that you won't pretend you do have it when you in fact don't really, so that you'll ask for help when you need it. So those are the 4 domains in a quick couple sentences.
And a quick way, we can get, anybody who wants to go deeper, obviously get the book, The Thin Book of Trust. Incredible resource. It is thin. I think we aspire to the same things. A big book people won't read, just like my book on Tough Conversations, which we'll kind of fold into this a little bit. What is one area of these domains that we could go just a little bit deeper and really serve our audience today in the realm of, I want to be a better leader? Is there an area that you feel like we could just zero in on?
I think I'd go back to the domain of care.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, if I'm a leader, my people are going to be looking to me and wanting to feel that I do have their interests in mind. I think about one leader that I coached some years ago, and before I started coaching him, I coached one of his direct reports. And what she told me was that when she joined his team, his first comment to her was, "I own you 24/7." And she said she almost just quit right then. And she had thought about quitting several times since then. And so we in coaching, we had our conversations about that. But then it turned out I was coaching him. And one of the things that was a huge aha for him was that, people actually want him to have their interests in mind as well as his own. It's not just about him. That's an extreme example, but building that sense of care is not intuitive to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what do we do? What do we do to build that sense of care as a leader? One of the things is listening to our people. And that isn't just, sitting there listening and, nodding our heads and actively listening. That's part of it. But beyond that, a great example, I had a client tell me the other day, my boss is amazing. I really trust that he cares about me because he remembers details from a conversation 2 weeks ago that I had with him, and he brings them into the conversation, a more recent conversation, and he'll continue to do that. So he remembers what I say and what I think and what seems to be important to me in those conversations that I have with him. So that's one of the, that's such a powerful and easy way to begin to build trust in that domain of care, is to really listen and ask questions about the person and what's going on. You talked earlier about the distinction between the KPIs and the work, if you will, and conversations where we actually talk about who we are as human beings, and taking the time to have those conversations now and then.
Is this more of a modern leadership? Because I know older school leadership in the 70s and 80s was extremely work focused.
Yes.
And, in the 90s, I don't know if it's much different, but that's when I started my professional career inside of, working for a living. I was 22 at the time. But more modernly, we're asked to care about the person, not just their work.
Well, and I would say that comes from the recognition that people stay for good managers, for good leaders, their own direct manager. People leave because their own direct manager is not working out for them. And so retention of good employees is that's an important thing in any company. You invest a lot of money to bring somebody in, train them up, get them going. And if they are then leaving because their assessment is that their manager doesn't really care about them, doesn't have their backs, that's a waste. It's a huge waste. And it doesn't take a huge investment of time to get it across to an employee that you do care. They can trust you to care about them. Part of it is being honest with them, of course, which kind of moves into the domain of sincerity. Being honest to the extent that you can be as a leader. Obviously, you can't and don't want to open the kimono and tell them everything, but you do want to be basically honest with them about areas that are of concern to them. One of the things that, and I think actually I use that as an example in my book, but I've come across it multiple times since then, is the whole issue of promotion, and if I'm an employee and I go to my boss and express that I would like to be considered for, a promotion within the organization, and my boss is honest with me about what I need to do in order to get that promotion and not make any commitments to doing it specifically, that's going to feel much more like care, trust in the domain of care, trustworthiness in the domain of care to me, than if he either says, "Oh yeah, no kidding, just wait, you'll get there," or "Yeah, I'm looking to promote you," but then doesn't ever actually do it.
Now, we have been talking about caring a lot today. And inside this, I want to talk about the behaviors of caring as I see this for top level executives in fast growth companies. I've got over 10 years of experience working with companies that are growing at an astronomical pace. Maybe it's 2x or 3x a year. But I wanted to share with you the things that you can do for free to actually be a better leader, to show that you care your employees. One is get personal. I know a lot of people don't want to get personal, but when you know that someone's daughter is going through ballet, or someone's son is going through baseball or basketball or some other sport, or someone's parents are aging and they're getting surgery, it's really important, if you really want them to know that you care about them, for them to know that you listen to the things. Maybe you even ask questions. Maybe some people don't share personal, but you go, "What's going on in your life?" So ask the questions about the personal work too. I know when I was reading one of the books, The $1 Trillion Coach, Bill Gove, and there, I think was the name of his, Bill Campbell, sorry, was talking about how in the beginning of meetings, they did not get on their phones. They actually put the phones down and just talked. They talked about what's going on in their lives, and he took notes about it so that when he wanted to engage with them, he would have the names of the kids, or the names of the teams, or the names of the ages. He knew details. So ask about the personal side. Another behavior behind care is what I would call shared goals. So if you sat down with an employee and you said, "I know you've been with here for a year, 5 years, whatever it is. What is it you want next?" They may say, "I want to learn to sell, or I want to learn to market, or I want to learn to be a project manager, or I want to learn to be a leader." Write it down and then make that a part of their development plan. If you can connect what they want and the company wants and the team wants together, these shared goals is what I would call, because they're shared amongst all of the parties, then they're going to feel like they're connected to the work, and they're going to care because you're helping them grow in their skill set. I know this is what it was like for me when I was in corporate America for 10 years. Every job I took were a specific reason. My consulting days were about strategy and how to see and develop strategies that would win. When I was in the world of IT, I wanted to understand internet projects and understanding the development of these technical projects, and I did that. And then I had another journey with the .com ages, from 99 to 2001, where I spent 2.5 years in sales because I knew that was important to and each of those was very intentional, but each of them gave me, I worked really hard because it was for me and the organization. So if you can tune into these shared goals of people, they will see that you care for them more than you care for just the business and just getting the work done. And that is a good thing. It hits the bottom line. It really does impact the overall culture and makes you one of the bosses they'll think about in years and years to come. Be the kind of leader that they want to follow. Care about your people. Back to Charles. I know one of the elements that is new in this 3rd edition, I'm going to hold it up again for people that are looking at the Thin Book of Trust, is the connection with neuroscience. Can you give us a little bit of a background on how trust and neuroscience are connected?
Yes, this is an area that I'm doing more research myself on. I'm reading as many articles as I can from the people who study particularly the neuroscience of trust. So fundamentally, trust is what we call trust is an interpretation of a neurobiological state. a neurobiological state that's marked by activity in certain brain structures and the presence of certain hormones and neurotransmitters in our bodies that create an internal sensation of kind of attraction to and wanting to and feeling safe with another individual. So we interpret that as trust, and we can trust that individual. And then we create, there's emotions that come with that, and then we create stories about what that means. But fundamentally, it's a neurobiological state. Distrust is also a neurobiological state. Different brain structures are activated, different hormones and neurotransmitters move through our systems that predispose us to protect ourselves, that predispose us to move away from that other individual whom what we say then is, I distrust that person. And so we move away from them. We protect ourselves. We don't share with them. All the things that you and I know, all of us really know, are the signs of distrust. But what I think is important about all of that is that building trust really has to do with calming that distrust network, if you will, the brain structures that produce that neurobiological state of fear, anxiety, whatever it is we want to call it, and also amplifying the trust network, those structures, brain structures, and the neurotransmitters the brain releases that give us that sense of wanting to, or feeling safe and wanting to be with someone. Now, both of those systems, if you will, are there in our bodies all the time. They're there for a reason. The distrust network is there to keep us safe. The trust network is there to allow us to work with other people, to collaborate, to coordinate action well with other people, so that we can get stuff done that we can't possibly do by ourselves. So both of them are valid. What we want to do is create the conditions in which the distrust network is calmed, the trust network is heightened and brought more to the fore.
Before we run, I know that you had a chance to look at our book. Amanda and I wrote this one coming out earlier this year, How to Have Tough Conversations. And there's some overlap with this, because I do see that when there's a breakdown in trust between two people, that usually the way forward is a tough conversation. It's something that a lot of people are avoiding. We wanted to create the framework behind that you created the framework for trust and building trust and maintaining trust and rebuilding trust. Give us a little bit of your perspective of the overlap between our two books.
Well, I think right off the bat, having a tough conversation requires trust. At least the willingness to tiptoe in with some trust, to calm the distrust network in my body and mind, brain, enough so that I'm willing to risk having this conversation with this person. And then doing so, and as I think you outlined I can't remember exactly what you say about it, but I remember you outline in your book how to have that conversation, how to kind of get into it. I do a similar thing in my book. It's a little bit different because mine is focused specifically on having a conversation when I don't trust somebody, right?
Yep.
So I'm very, very specifically focused on how to move into that, where yours is more general. But I see a huge overlap between the two in the sense that having that tough conversation requires trust. And I think the way that you frame it, I love it, actually. It allows people to get how they can actually do that successfully. And so a big part of it is, how are they going to build self-trust, right? There's that piece of, can I trust myself in this conversation, in the sense that, am I going to be sufficiently resilient that if this conversation doesn't work, I'm still going to be okay, which will allow me to feel safe enough to begin the conversation, to get into it.
Those are all excellent points. I think that one of the things that I like to highlight with this is, like, when trust has been broken, it's hard to re-engage that. In your book, you have an actual, kind of an example of that conversation, which we didn't go that far, but the framework, I think, really works well for this. And if you add in there some of the other elements, like what's going on during the conversation, like listening, truly being present. I know we shouldn't have to remind people to be present today, but it is.
Yep.
And all of the elements that go with that, and then following up, and it's not just one conversation. Like trust is built by us saying that we're going to address this together, or you've got a plan. I want to make sure that I'm supporting you, whatever it is. So I'm glad that you've taken the time to be here with us, Charles. You've made a tremendous impact in my life. So just know that. I don't probably get to say it enough over the last 11 years, but thank you so much for being here and sharing your work with us.
Gene, thank you. It's been a great conversation. I love your questions, and yeah, it's cool. Thanks.
Wow, another incredible interview here on the podcast. I got a little bit teary-eyed earlier because I was talking with Charles off the camera, and I'll share with you a little bit of that from my perspective. Charles is one of the people in my life that has made a huge difference. He didn't even know that he was playing such a critical role, but in the midst of my breakdown, where I was running a business and I was frauded out of $3 million, and I was trying to find myself, I met Charles, and it was through my coach training that I was able to connect with him. And he is the mentor coach for the group of us. And there were a few moments where I struggled. And what I wanted to highlight for you today is, we're all evolving and growing. Some of us faster, some of us really slow. But this was a moment where I needed to have a different perspective. I needed to have conversations. I needed some new tools to actually move forward. And so if you think about that, Charles played such a critical role in my life. And I thank him, and I appreciate him guiding me to where I am today. It's been 14 years since that happened as we record this, but it's something that I've grown from, and it was the worst thing ever happened, but also the best. All this I share with you because I've done a lot of work on my own growth. And if I could help you with your own growth, it would be a part of my mission to help you become an extraordinary leader and grow the company to your level of success. So if you have a chance and you want to go deeper with this work, I recommend the 3rd edition of the Thin Book of Trust, and really appreciate you being here. Being an avid fan of the podcast, listening this deep, it means a lot to me. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, with courage. I'll see you next time.